This is Clearing Spotlight, where markets meet clarity, institutions navigate liquidity, risk, and infrastructure. Welcome to Clearing Spotlight. Today, I'm very pleased to be welcomed by Johann Kerbrat, the General Manager and Senior Vice President of Crypto at Robinhood. Welcome, Johann.
Thank you for having me.
Can we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, your role at Robinhood, and what digital assets businesses Robinhood is active in?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I'm Johan. I joined the company about 5 years ago, initially as a head of engineering for crypto, and then we moved to the entire lead for crypto. So basically, we oversee the entire digital asset business from spot trading, staking, transfer, wallets, and we also acquired a company called Bitstamp 9 months ago. Bitstamp is more focused on institutional business. They have a deep order book with deep liquidity in it. And we also focus a lot on the crypto as a service so that other company can integrate crypto services using Bitstamp technology.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's kind of interesting set of businesses you have together. If we could start on the topic of tokenization, Robinhood has a big long background in traditional equities. You've launched stock tokens in the EU. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the idea for us was really to not just focus on crypto for trading assets that are crypto based, but also how do we use the blockchain technology and actually revamp a bit the traditional system. What we've seen missing on the old way of trading stocks is instant settlement, 24/7, fractionalization by default, all of these things that you can get for free with blockchain technology. So the goal for us was really to use this as a way to expand internationally in a faster way and also bring innovation to the customers. We launched in the EU with about 200 stock token in June of last year, and now we have more than 2,000. So it really shows that our tokenization engine can work in multiple ways to really tokenize any type of assets. We started with public stock, and we think that we will be able to adapt to private equity, real estates, and more real world assets in the future.
Of course, this is the great value proposition in terms of opportunities for investors, for institutions, kind of how do we see tokenization, kind of really looking towards the future?
Yeah, I think for us, it was really a way to actually improve access to the assets. So if you're in the EU or in the Europe, it's sometimes a little difficult to access US stocks or US ETF. You have to go through like different brokerage, you have a lot of fees. And so our goal was to bring this tokenization product and give access and exposure to all these assets in an easy way. In the future, we also plan to offer 24/7, which I think is pretty important in Europe when the overlap with the trading hours in the US is pretty small. And we also want to bring some of this idea of instant settlement. If you think about what happened in the US, we went from T+2 to T+1, which is still a full business day before a transaction can settle. If you buy on Friday, it means that if you have a long weekend, it's not settle until a Tuesday. And that's where like we think tokenization can bring a lot of this value and reduce the capital that you need, reduce credit risk with the counterparty, and also just allow you to decide and move your portfolio faster. But I think that's just like step one, and I think real world asset being tokenized is going to change a lot of ways that we're thinking about things. Stablecoin is probably the best example, right? Where at the beginning, people were like, okay, well, what can I do with this tokenized dollar? But now you see ways to get lending yield on your stablecoin. You can do a lot more things. And we think we can adapt that to basically any type of asset.
Interesting. And then, there's the markets element, the value proposition, and then in terms of the infrastructure itself, and can you talk to us about the advantages of the infrastructure of blockchain, how it relates to tokenization?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for us, there is a few things. Transparency, decentralization is kind of core to everything that we want to do. We think transparency is very important. There are too many times where there has been issues with financial institution, and having this transparent access and availability to look at the data and to see what's going on, I think is pretty critical. The second thing is it's going to be a lot faster and cheaper, like I mentioned, to operate these rails and this system. And so we will be able to pass back the return to the customer and make sure that the customer doesn't have to continue paying a lot of these fees that they're continuously doing right now. And so, I think with all of that combined, at the end of the day, you will have a more efficient system. You will be able to connect exchanges across the world in a better way, so that you can have all the economy from each country actually being encouraged to get on chain, and on top of that, the customer will be benefiting from it. So we think it's just not just a way to offer a different product. It's really a way that we are going to be able to modernize the traditional stack that has been kind of stuck in the old ways.
Yeah, right. And it has been a long time with the existing
Right.
stack. So it was super interesting from a purely technical point of view about the infrastructure. I can agree. And then, so, when we look at the use cases, tokenizing dollars or tokenizing fiat, which is the
Mhm.
stablecoin use case. But then the question is, what's next? Is it debt, equities? Is it real estate? Is it some other, asset class? What do you think are the kind of next targets or the next kind of topics of the tokenization, uh, you know, evolution?
Yeah, it's a good question. We think the tokenization aspect can work for any type of asset, not just public stock. And the more the world is kind of evolving right now, the more people are thinking about how to invest in different markets, different countries. So I think what we're going to focus first is going to expand the type of exchanges you can access to. Like right now, we started with US, but there's no reason that we couldn't go with a London stock exchange or Euronext in Europe or other. And then on the private equity side, I also think it's very important. We did a giveaway last year with SpaceX and OpenAI, but for us, we see private equity as still like one of the big barriers that limit the normal people to the ultra high net worth people that have like special access and things like that. So we think that the world has changed quite a bit. Back in the days, company will IPO pretty quickly after like raising money and generating revenue. If you think about Google, for example. And nowadays, like company actually wait as long as possible before going public because they're able to raise a lot of capital in the private market. And so the retail customer is really being used as a exit liquidity instead of being used as someone who can also contribute to the success of the company and also get the benefit of the company. So for us, we really think that's one of the focus that we need to have. Our mission is to democratize the finance for everybody, and so if we want to do that, we need to also include them on some of this private equity system.
That's super interesting. I've not heard anyone talk about the democratization of ECM and DCM market. It's kind of interesting spin. Yes, thank you for that. If we can move on, slightly
Mhm.
different topic. Recent acquisition of Bitstamp. Very, interesting news article. Um, how does Robinhood's and Bitstamp's crypto businesses and traditional businesses, of course, play to each other's strengths? What's the combined value proposition?
Yeah, there was a many reason for these deals. What we were really excited about was threefold. One was the expansion internationally. Bitstamp had 50 licenses across the globe, including in the UK with the FCA, including in Singapore. And so for us, it was really giving us a way to expand internationally and in a faster way than if we had to apply from scratch on all of these licenses. The second point was the institutional business. Robinhood has been focused on retail for a very long time. And we never really had relationship with market maker, liquidity provider, hedge funds, family offices, banks. And Bitstamp actually has that. So Bitstamp is being used by multiple banks across the globe, for example, to offer crypto services to their customer. And we think this is a very interesting use case now that regulation is coming. A lot more banks are excited about it. A lot more family offices want to have access to crypto. And so being able to access a very deep and tight order book on Bitstamp, and at the same time having as a counterparty a company like Robinhood that is public with a very strong balance sheet, really gives us a good position in the market. And the third point was really the synergies, like you mentioned, between the two companies. So Robinhood has been focusing a lot more on advanced trading in the past year. We want to offer like the best price to our customer. We also want to offer like different type of features where you can really go into like advanced order types. You can see a lot of information. All of this is being possible by the routing to Bitstamp as an exchange, and so it really changed the type of feature we've been able to build in the past year.
Cool. And then following that, can you give us a quick summary of the services that Bitstamp offers, the kind of the core products?
Yeah, so it's an exchange. You can offer anything around spot trading, and we have 85 plus pair on spot. We also have a derivative product. We have more than 7 contracts now, where you can have up to 7x in leverage. And we also have anything around like staking and lending, kind of the more classic product for institution. Derivative is something that we're really excited about. Having a platform that is regulated in Europe and offer this type of contract is fairly rare. There's not a lot. And so it gives a lot of security to our customer, knowing that, we are not just coming up with new contracts overnight. We're having a pretty set of guideline and rules before we can launch this type of products.
Cool. Interesting. And then, when you look at, how Robinhood builds infrastructure and, how do you look at it from the point of view of both crypto native, but also more traditional institutional requirements for infrastructure and, kind of controls and these kinds of things?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Robinhood has existed in different ways. Before it was just an equity business, an option business, and then we added crypto to it, and now we have this very strengths, this very big strengths where we are able to be one of the largest retail platform for crypto and also one of the largest retail platform for equities. And so this has been really interesting. We've been working with different regulator. We have licenses from the SEC, FINRA, New York DFS, so we know how to work with regulator very well. And we also have this very large customer base with more than 26 million customer. And so for us, we want to make sure that anytime that we launch something, the service is robust enough to be able to serve our customer, and it also give us the strengths where we can kind of force pricing against the institution that we work with. And so in general, we offer the lowest cost in average on crypto because we have so much of liquidity demand and distribution demand. So it's been interesting to build this with Robinhood and Bitstamp.
Oh, interesting. You know, getting down into the to the weeds of blockchain, how do you approach bridging, the traditional finance rails, which are very structured and gate kept, versus kind of DeFi, and you said you believe in crypto can be the underlying infrastructure. What does that look like? Permission, not permissioned, specific chain, more broad set of chains. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's still the early days, and we'll see a lot of things evolving. But I strongly believe that permissionless is important. If we go back to the idea of a permission chain and no transparency and no decentralization, at this point we're just talking about a database, and I don't think we need that many difficulty to create a database. So for us, we do believe permissionless is important. And then, companies that connect to the permissionless blockchain can actually create their own set of compliance requirements and make sure that it works with the regulator that they have. And so, for example, if you only want KYC wallets to interact with your contracts, you can build that within a permissionless chain. It doesn't really have to be a problem between each other. So that's where we are focusing on. And I think to your second point, there will be many blockchain. It's already happening. Every big company is launching their own blockchain at some point. Same thing that is happening with stablecoin, where you have like tens of different stablecoins. And so we see our role as a way to aggregate all of this system, make it as seamless as possible to the customer. And when they buy a stock, for example, and we have to connect to 3 or 4 different chain, we'll take care of that for them. And the customer should not have to worry about bridging or gas token and all this complexity. And that's only when I think you will see adoption, because right now it's still so complicated to connect to a non-custodial wallet and connect to a specific chain and etc. So
Interesting. And then you have Robinhood chain,
Mhm.
and can give us the rationale why layer two, why
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us it was like twofold. One, we wanted to be able to customize the chain to what we needed to do. We want to focus really into financial assets. We don't necessarily have a lot of knowledge on other things that are happening in the crypto, and we don't think we can bring a lot of value there. But where we can bring value is on traditional financial instruments, where we have a lot of expertise, and we know that we can actually improve things a lot for the customers. And so for that, we wanted to be able to customize a chain at some level and not have to compete with other needs that a normal blockchain will have. The second part is that we wanted to have decentralization and security by default. Creating our own L1 would have been possible, but then you're lacking of these 2 points, and we go back to my point earlier on, like, this is just a fancy database. But by building an L2 on top of Ethereum, we're getting the security by default of the Ethereum network that has been worked on for many years, and we also get this decentralization with all the validators that are kind of securing the Ethereum system for many years as well now. So we get a bit of the best of the two world, and it's also going to be a permissionless chain, so anyone will be able to develop on it and contribute to it. And Robinhood system will be working on it more and more. As long as we can bring efficiency and value to the customer, we'll try to migrate to the chain.
Right. And the EVM chain makes a lot of logical sense in terms of existing adoption and network, and specifically
Right.
Arbitrum. You chose Arbitrum. What was the rationale for that?
Yeah. So the EVM was also important for liquidity. We wanted to make sure that people could bridge seamlessly between different chain. Arbitrum stack was really, we've been working with the Arbitrum team for a long time. They've been focusing a lot on how to create a bunch of chains that can interact between each other very easily. So that's part of the Arbitrum One chain. So that was really important for us. They also have multiple tools that we really like. For example, Stylus, which allows to bring any type of language into the chain, and so you don't have to necessarily limit yourself. And they also have a way to prioritize transaction that we think is non-predatory, and we think it's pretty important for our customers. So the L2 will still be using the Arbitrum stack. So pretty flexible. People that have already integrated with Arbitrum will be very easily able to integrate to the Robinhood chain, and at the same time, we're getting all the benefit from the current Arbitrum stack.
And then this is all a lead into Robinhood chains part in the ecosystem or value proposition of tokenization, and what kind of institutions I think would be building on Robinhood chain? Would it be more crypto native or more kind of traditional?
I think you will see a combination. Just in the last few months, you've heard about NYSE, Nasdaq, DTC thinking about tokenization. So, like I said, our chain will be permissionless, so anyone will be able to join us. And I think there will be a combination of company you will see. By having a lot of distribution, Robinhood does a lot of this non-toxic flow that institutions are actually pretty excited about. So I'm expecting to see a combination. At the beginning, I think it will be a bit more crypto focused and people thinking a bit more crypto. But our goal is to really launch the chain with all our tokenized products, the stock token that we talked at the beginning. And so I think that will bring also a lot of institution.
Okay, interesting. Finishing with the topic of payments, of course, stablecoins, very relevant, very topical. How do you see their role evolving in the terms of settlement payments? Of course, I think generally, but currently not limited, but active in crypto native, but still less so in traditional. But also market efficiency and sort of broad payments use cases. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we think stablecoin is really just at the beginning. For a very long time, not having clear regulation was kind of slowing down the adoption of stable. With the Genius Act passing and some of the thing being discussed on the Clarity Act in the US, I think you will see more and more possibility to adopt stablecoin and actually use it in different ways. We already use it quite a bit for settlement with our market makers, so we want to make sure that we can sell 24/7 with them, and that's when we use stablecoin. We also accept stablecoin on different part of the platform, and I think what you're really going to see is a wider adoption when the yield is going to be able to be passed to the end customer. If you think about it and you invest in a contract using stable, you will be able to also get some of the returns from it. So I think we're just at the very, very beginning there, but still a lot of issues that you're seeing around fragmentation. A lot of stable coins are being created. Some have different type of reserves, some have different type of ways of working. And so I think as the industry, we need to also focus a bit on disclosure, understanding how things are working, and also understanding how do we safely get adoption of the stablecoin.
Yeah, proof of reserves and or
Hmm.
declaration or verifiability of reserves
Exactly.
is kind of interesting topic. And so clearly there is the fiat-backed, AAA, debt-backed stable coins, but there's also the emergence of I call them yield-bearing
Right.
stable things, because I'm not sure that they're so much a stable coin as an articulation of a money market fund or something. Anyway, do you think that they have a use case beyond the collateral use case, or do you think they really are just kind of the equivalent of treasuries?
I think it's a combination. I think tokenized money market fund have a lot of values. Tokenized deposit as well. It's more my push to a lot of the industry is to be clear of what it is. Let's not call a stablecoin a money market fund or vice versa. The same way that lending and staking are different things, and we should not use the two differently. And so, I think you will see different use cases for different type of industry people. But as long as we're not trying to confuse the customer and make them purchase an asset that is not what it actually is, I think it's going to be the main point we focus on. But for us, overall on stablecoin, we want to make sure that we can accept most of the major ones. We want to make sure that people can easily move in and move out without having to think about, is it USDC, USDT, USDG, like all these things.
Mm.
So our main focus has been on UX and UI and making sure that people understand what they are doing without having to understand all the complexity underlying.
Interesting. Well, that's kind of interesting take.
Yeah,
Focus on the users rather than
exactly.
the product.
That's
Yeah.
been our main focus at Robinhood for a very long time. We want to make sure that when customers are using the product, they don't have to necessarily understand the complexity. The same way that when you send a text to your friend, you don't really know what's happening behind the scene. We want to do the same thing on the wallet or on any type of our crypto applications.
Perfect. Well, I'd just like to thank you for joining us on Clearing Spotlight. It's been really interesting to hear your insights and, of course, the news about Robinhood and Bitstamp. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Great. I'd like to thank our users for joining us today on Clearing Spotlight.